Greeting fellow Rotarians. I am Michael Nisler, your club president for 2018 and 2019. We are 95 years young and old, and we are being the inspiration. Welcome to Petaluma. Oh, good to have you all here. We're going to have a fun day today, and so on this date, the thought for the day, at Last Minute Engineering, and Delta, do you want to come up here and give us a thought for the day? Man, you look like you're dressed to the nines today. Yeah, come on down.
This is short notice, so I apologize. And these are little thoughts. This is not like a big, okay. So, behind every great man is a woman rolling her eyes. Jim Carrey said that. Go to heaven for the climate, go to hell for the company.
Ooh.
And last, if love is the answer, could you please rephrase the question? That's all I have.
Amen. Well said. Thank you, Ed. Okay, the Rotary moment for fellowship is something we always make time for, so if you would please spend a couple of minutes, give handshakes, hugs, get a chance to know your neighbor. Ed Fullerton, good to see you, and Carol. And so last week I didn't have time to read this envelope. This is, I guess, the last of my installments to get my bell back. But before I get my bell back, this being the 5th week in solitude, without a bell, so sad, no bell, but, you know, several weeks ago, I had to wear the foo-foo and the wings, you remember, and kind of that was the first installment. And I got, I guess it's a brass screw that comes off of the bell. That was my first installment. And last week, and I'm hopefully going to fill it this week, it says, President Nisler, congratulations on completing your first task. Yes, your bell is safe and unharmed, and it will remain as such if you follow the instructions carefully. In the attached envelope, you will find your next requirements. Anytime you are standing up in front of this entire meeting, okay, you must hold this item in your hand and lick it consistently. Really? We will be watching you with your cameras. Don't stop licking. I tell you, the things I have to do, Logan. If you complete this task successfully, you will receive your final task next week. Really? Well, I tell you, you guys are milking this one, so let's see what's lickable in here. Oh, look at this. How about that? Yes. Oh, where's that? Is that from the other microphone? I think it is. Might be next to the speaker out there. So, okay, well, I hope I get a chance to not do like in the military. In the military, when, and Mike Caruana will relate to this, if you got a care package sent to you when you're over in Vietnam, what they would do is they say, well, go ahead and eat it like gum with the wrapper on. So I'm going to take the wrapper off, and, oh, this is nice. Consistently, huh? Well, I'll give it a go. So, let's see. I think this is what they're saying is don't talk so much. Is you think that's what's trying to be said? So, okay, visiting Rotarians, can we have Mike Ambrosia come on up for a moment? Or who's the, oh, Ed Fullerton? Oh, okay, you are taking the almighty duty, so please come up. I think that microphone, can you just silence it when it's not in use? Thank you. Okay, great. Oh, well, wait a second. Now we need to get a microphone for you. There you go.
Thank you, sir. Fellow Rotarians, I would like to introduce our visiting Rotarian, Pauline Johns from the Petaluma Valley Club. And thank you.
And may I introduce the newest member of your club? My huge pleasure to introduce and welcome Suzuki. Is it Takeuchi? Yeah, Takeuchi.
Good to have you here.
I want to mention Mizuki is making fabulous progress with her English. She just said twice as much to you today as she said at my club yesterday. At this rate, in a month, we won't be able to shut her up.
That's right. She'll be passing Maurice before we know it. Well, good to have you here. And I do have a little video I'm going to show of you when we had you come into the airport and welcome you. So thank you again for being here. So next up, we have some guests here today. And I guess, can we get the microphone to Brandon? And this will be the second time for Mireille. So happy to have you here.
Mr. President, fellow Rotarians, please join me in welcoming Mireille Broussard for our second time.
So happy to have you here. Excellent. Okay, so next up, on August 3rd, we had a damn good time there. We were at Jack London Park, and we had a lot of things going on there. I think we had about 6 from our club. And, I guess I've been told by my beautiful wife, Grace, that she's sort of a busy time, but she has one other that we must say. Grace, do you want to have the honors? Stand up, please.
We are delighted to have with us our grandson, Bobby, today.
Bobby McWilliams, here from Tracy, California. And he's teaching me all about leadership. He is in Boy Scouts, and he spent most of the entire summer is having the Cub Scouts and other kids that he was off in camp. So thank you for taking 4 days off and being with Gramps. That's very nice to have you here. Okay, so back to the event we had at Broadway Under the Stars. It was phenomenal. I think that there was more district governors than there were than Rotarians. I had no idea we had so many district governors, but Maggie, I see she's smiling there, and Mike, and so Judy and Gail, we had a really good time up there, and I want to say is that Joanne Ferris, thank you so much for all you've done. Let's give her a round of applause there. We had a lot of clubs that were there and a lot of DGs, so it was a fantastic time. And so, let's see if I can get this puppy going here. This was, as we mentioned, is that on Sunday, we went out in the morning and had a good time at the San Francisco airport, and this is what it's like. Can you imagine, like, okay, you've come from about 10,000 miles away, you've had umpteen hours getting to the airport, and then on the plane, and you're getting off and going to a country that you hadn't been before, and thinking about, what's it going to be like? I'm going to meet these people, they call themselves Rotarians. And so this is what happened.
Welcome. Welcome. I'm Julie. This is Logan. Okay.
Julie and Walt. Julie came 3 or 4 months with that family first. There's our colleague Brown.
I am Grace. Okay. Nice to meet you. And this is Michael.
And Michael, a pleasure. Thank you for making the long trip for us.
She's going to need some pins, honey. We're going to have to get her some pins.
Yeah. Rotary is always love pins.
Here, I can take this one.
This is what all good women do first thing as they get on their Facebook accounts.
So they're going through the Facebook thing, and they're starting to get their names and information, but a little bit. But once again, Mizuki, so happy to have you here. Thanks for coming. Monday, August 6th, boy, it's been a busy week, hasn't it? And we had For the Children. A great fundraiser. We were hoping in our club to raise $3,000. We came very close to that number. And we did it with the Tri-Clubs, and they did very well also. So it was a wonderful event for everybody. We had live entertainment with the Scottish Fiddlers, as you may have seen before. They did a good job. The O'Brien Center, they had normally ballet, but they did more improv, modern. Some things were even like Bollywood. And we had the silent raffle and auction. And if you want to see it, go to the Petaluma Rotary Club and just take a look at Save the Children. Save the Children. You can see more about the video. So that was great. And I want to thank Sherry Ranney, Mike Caruano, Larry Jonas, Mike Ambrosi, Chris Ranney, and many of the rest of you. So thank you very much. Can we give them a big round of applause for the great fundraiser? Okay, so moving on. The Larka fires. That was brought up last week, and we know that Chris Ranney with Dirk Slater had done it. And there was one question that came up, Chris, and if I may, correct me if I'm wrong, but It's my understanding that for Shasta County fires, we came out with a announcement. You may have all seen it from Barb Spangler, our district governor, and it's the website link is not easy, but if you just search in Shasta Community Disaster Fund, it's very easy to go through and make a donation if you wish. There's a telephone number, 530-244-1219, if you wish to. Ed Fullerton, I'll have him come up and speak another week about this, but we had a conversation. Oh, I got to lick a little bit here. We had a conversation about what Sebastopol is doing for fire awareness. And I think that would be a good program for us, is what they're doing up in some of their clubs, and for it to come down here to talk about what we as individuals can do. So thank you, Chris Ranney, for all you're doing very much. Okay, our August session, some of you may not have been here last week, but in summary, we decided that we want to avoid having fatigue on our fundraising, and we had lessons learned. You recall that we had about 3 weeks ago when the Sonoma Valley Club, and that was kind of the recurring thing where we had heard from them. So, we'll certainly have the golf tournaments, the super raffle, and some of the others. I'm working with the board to see, what we can do to have it where we are focused on more for less. And of course, fellowship, friendship, and fun is what we're all about. And lastly, is we want to have more activities. And I'll talk next week more about some of our social activities coming soon to a theater near you. Okay, so Petaluma Pete is coming up the 16th, and he is certainly a redevelopment guru, media and marketing, so I think you'll really love his talk. After that, city manager, who's getting how close to retirement, past President Onita? How close is he?
End of November.
End of November. Okay, so you want to see him, get your last licks and ask his question, but city manager will be there. And on the 30th, we are indeed going to have fun, fellowship, and friendship. So that will be a great session. So I'm sorry, yes, past District Governor Ed Fullerton is reminding me to fulfill my obligation. So County Supervisor is coming up next, David Rabbit, great guy. We'll have a fun time with him. And after that is that fundraiser we were talking about, the golf tournament. And Charlie, do you have anything you would like to say about it, or do you want me just to continue on? You got something? Can somebody, Rick's got the microphone right by him.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, November the 10th. At any rate, we've still got a few slots for foursomes. If you haven't put your foursomes together, please do so and send them in to us. If you know anybody that's not necessarily part of the club that would like to play, please let us know about that too. Anyway, September the 10th.
Okay, very good. So there's some of the whole sponsors we have here, and certainly we look forward to $150 to play. Bring your friends, and we'll have a great time. Okay, next up is remind the bottle of wine, I think, is one thing that Chad said to bring, if you'll remember. So if you have that when it's there. And Brandon, when you were, just before you remember, I think you played in the golf tournament. Could you just give us just a couple words on what it was like from an outsider looking in as a prospective member?
It was a great opportunity to really connect with a lot of people that were in the club that I didn't know. So it was a nice intro to the fellowship and the camaraderie of the group. Rick Mossy was very kind in not berating me about my terrible golf game, and so that was enjoyable. No, I had a blast. It was well worth the time. So.
Oh, thank you. And could you give the microphone to Royce? Royce says that your father was a real legacy here up at the club and did a lot for the golf tournament to make sure everybody had a good time, for doing service above self. And I know that this is something that you find you would like to continue as legacy.
Yeah, it started actually with my grandfather, Royce, who used to provide all the refreshments and stuff on the course. And then when he got to the point where he didn't want to do it, he left it to my dad, and my dad's good friend Lex Christensen, which some of you may know. So after he passed, I talked to Lex about continuing that on, and so I used one of my guys at work, my best friend Eric and Lex. They continue to keep us hydrated on the course. So So anyway, we're definitely looking forward to the tournament this year.
Well, thanks for your service as always. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, stewardship time. Let's see who we have for stewardship. Mike Stauber is not here. We'll catch up with him. Is Larry Jonas. Are you here again 2 weeks in a row? How about that? Mr. Rule of 85, Larry Jonas, tell us about where you have been.
Where have I been? I already forgot. No, I had an ideal trip. It should be on everybody's bucket list. I went to South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. And of course, the highlight was seeing all the animals. We were lucky enough to see the big five: leopards, lions, elephants, and the other guys. Oh, hippos and water buffaloes. And it was fantastic. You learn a lot. I actually met a Rotarian in the Victoria Falls and talked to her about Rotary, and she's going to maybe get back to me about some potential projects. You learn a lot by talking to people. The underlying racism is still basically alive and well. It reminds me of the United States in the 60s, during apartheid, that is. During apartheid, they had separate white bathrooms and separate black bathrooms. And when we went to the museum, you were given your ticket, and on your ticket, it said white or black. It didn't matter what you were, but that's what your ticket said. And you had to take a special entrance into the museum, depending on what your race was on your ticket, to drive home the point about racism. Now, the white people who are in the minority are worried about the blacks basically kicking them out. Mm-hmm. So hopefully they're going to learn from what was Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, because they're impoverished, and poverty and corruption is just terrible. But on the good side, we stayed at some fabulous hotels and resorts. And if anybody's interested, feel free to contact me about it, because it was a great, great trip.
Good, thank you. Well, before you go, I guess you are a Rule of 85, and you know we have our stewardship. We don't have fines anymore. But would you care to make a contribution to your stewardship schedule?
I can do 50.
50 would be great. Thank you, Larry. Okay, next up is our raffle, and yes, immediate past president Chris Ranning.
Sherry's not here, but we would also, in terms of stewardship, like to donate to the cause for our second grandchild, Elvie, who was born on July 26th.
Oh my goodness! Wonderful! Oh, well, congratulations! I heard about that.
$50 goes to $50. So
50 for 50.
And we're heading to Sweden on August 18th.
We'll be sure to tell Sherry thank you for that. Excellent news. Okay. And so, do we have the? Oh, here we are. Would you be so kind? Okay. Would you read the last four numbers? I like to do them.
2651.
2651. Oh, we have it here. Forrest. Wow, he's like under the radar screen for sure. Okay, you know the drill. We have the purse here. So would you? We got a lot of blues. We got one brown in here. Why don't you see if you're feeling lucky today? Blue. Well, we have some of the Bolero one. This is a special. There, you don't make anymore, so congratulations. There you go. Good. Thank you for your contribution. The Dictionary Drive appreciates your support. Okay, continuing on is that, well, Governor Jerry Brown is, he's been kind of busy these days with the fires, and so people in the nearby counties, he keeps them busy. So where we thought that Senator Bill Dodds was going to be here today, things have happened, and will be explained, but we have a great representative here. So what's going on right now, by August 31st, Governor Brown and his associates have to come up in their executive session with a deadline, and we'll hear more about that. But the categories are going to be for wildfire preparation, prevention, And of course, these things like utilities, I think we all hear about that, don't we? What's going on with PG&E. But there's been 11 fires we've had so far, and so some are even suggesting that the district attorneys file legal action, and PG&E says, you know, we're good to go. We've made a lot of investments. We'll probably hear some about that. And so one of the things we do as individuals want to do is for combustible materials near the home, if you've got leaves at this time of year, it's easy for them to get in our gutters and things, but you know, try to keep a safe distance. I mean, if you're in the Coffee Park area, it's going to take more than that, but you know, do things you can if you are separated from other homes. Some of the things that you may have seen yesterday in the paper, VeriRisk has come out with an analysis, and they say that there's 2 million homes of our, you know, 15 million plus, 15% are at high risk. So some of them are at high risk because they're in a high risk area, and so a multiplier of 75% times the homes gets somewhere like Nevada, Tuolumne County, Mendocino. We're not quite so bad here. We're down to 23% risk with our better part of 500,000 people. But I'm sure from an insurance perspective, we're going to be hearing more of that. So there's a lot of things going on, and I know that our Senator Bill Dodds is going to be doing his best to represent us on these issues. So without further ado, Logan Pitts is legislative analyst here in our Sonoma County, and so he really has his pulse on what's going on. So Logan, would you like to come up and go ahead and show us the show? So thank you so much for coming up today.
Thanks, Michael. I'm not going to hide behind the podium. So, thanks for having me here today. I'll talk in a little bit why Senator Dodd can't be here, but it was unexpected yet very important. So it's actually going to be happening pretty soon why he can't be here. But we'll get to that in a minute. So I'm not Senator Dodd. I'm Logan Pitts. I'm sorry that you're stuck with me today. Michael did say some of you got in here for free, so insert the joke about there's no free lunch. But I want to hear mostly from you folks. So I'll talk for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll do questions. So save your question. So I'm Logan Pitts. I'm the Sonoma County field representative for Senator Dodd. So essentially, I'm out here when he can't be. He has 6 different counties in his Senate district. We represent almost 1 million people. So that's a lot of folks to cover. And he has people like me all over the place. He's doing something right now that is really one of the only things that no one else can do, which is be in Sacramento voting, sitting on a committee. So that's why he has me. I'm born and raised in Santa Rosa, went to Santa Rosa Junior College in Sonoma State, got a political science degree, also on the board of directors for the Alumni Association there. So I'm proud Seawolf. I live in Santa Rosa now with my wife. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about Senator Dodd's district. Like I said, it's 6 counties, Napa, Sonoma, Solano, Yolo, and parts of Sacramento and Contra Costa. So it's big. Like I said, almost 1 million people. That's more than a member of Congress represents. Senator Dodd's lucky in that he lives in Napa. He's from there. And so he can go home every night. He doesn't have to live in Sacramento. So let me tell you a little bit about him too, real quick, and I'll skip back to the district. So who is Senator Dodd? He's a Rotarian, for one, proud Rotarian, and he has been for 35 years in Napa. He also was in the private sector for most of his life. He owned a Culligan water franchise. It was pretty successful. He sold it in his 40s, did pretty well, and decided that he wanted to run for local office. So he went to run for the Napa County Board of Supervisors, unexpectedly beat an incumbent in the primary. That's pretty unusual. And then went on to never even be challenged again for re-election. He was a popular guy, so he was there for 14 years. He decided in 2014, I want to have a wider reach. I want to help more people. So he moved up to the legislature, to the assembly, and then got into the Senate in 2016. So he didn't need to go into public service. He's certainly not doing it for the paycheck. He's doing it because partially what he learned at Rotary, the service above self. He's talked to me about the 4-way test. I wish that applied to politics all the time. We could use that a little bit more, that four-way test. So I'll just tell you, he's just a really straight-up good guy to work for. So he's a straight shooter. He describes himself as a moderate Democrat, and I think that probably fits the district pretty well. It's generally a Democratic district, but we have a lot of regular working class folks, especially in Solano County. It's not as wealthy as Sonoma County. It's really a lot like the rest of the United States, a lot like middle America, and people just trying to get by, commuting a long way to their work, sadly. But it's really one of the most last affordable places. So we have a lot of great communities in Solano and all over. And that's 40% of our district, Solano County right there. Vallejo being the biggest city. We have Petaluma. So in Sonoma County, we have Petaluma, Cotati, Roner Park, and the city of Sonoma. So it's about 35% of the county, and Senator McGuire as the rest. So we have a staff of about 16 people, about half of them are in the district and half are in the capital. The other thing that Senator Dodd does is he's the chairman of an important committee. It's called the Governmental Organization Committee. And they deal with some really cool stuff like horse racing and gambling. They also deal with some other less noticed things like official state animals, state seals, silly things like that. And then also something important called the Office of Emergency Services. So that's our version of FEMA in California. So any legislation affecting that goes through Senator Dodd's committee. Obviously, that's an issue we've been paying a lot of attention to, so I'll get to that. Why is he not here today? He's not here today, as your president explained, because he is sitting on the Conference Committee on Wildfire Preparedness and Preparation. So, what is that? A conference committee is kind of a weird thing. They have their regular committees, like I just described. Those are always there, they meet regularly. A conference committee is both the Senate and the Assembly coming together to work on something big, a big issue. These aren't standing committees. They're unusual. And so there were a lot of legislators working on the issue of wildfire response, coming at it from a lot of different directions. The governor and the leaders in the legislature decided, okay, we need to get all on one page. So they formed this committee. Senator Dodd is the co-chairman of the committee for the Senate side, and they're having a hearing right now. And what they're talking about, or in about 30 minutes or so, they're talking about what's called inverse condemnation, and this is what your president got at. That is essentially who's liable when a utility causes damage. And if you have the next 4 hours, we'll really dig into this utility liability conversation. But let's just talk about what starts a fire, because that's where it all begins. It's a triangle. Firefighters will tell you this, it's really easy. It's a spark, it's a fuel, and it's weather. So it's a triangle, all three of those are needed. So what we're talking about with liability is the spark, what starts the fire. And in about half of fires, it's utility infrastructure. So that also begs the question, what about the other half? And we'll get to that. But on the utilities, it's half the problem, so let's deal with that first. The number one thing this committee is going to do, that everyone agrees on, even PG&E, is we need better regulations. We need tougher regulations, and they're going to be expensive. They're going to have to pay a lot of money to comply with our new rules. They need to, because their systems weren't good enough. That is something that's been there from day one. The governor agrees with that, and like I said, even the companies agree with that. So then there's the thornier question of liability. And I wish I knew what was going to happen in Sacramento today, and I don't think anyone really knows. This is, I was talking with Al about it here, and it's a hard balance, because unlike every other private sector entity, a investor in utility in California, everyone is their customer. So it's not like the financial industry or the car industry in the 80s where the government was giving it assistance. Every ratepayer is every taxpayer, essentially. And so it's different. You have to look at it in a different way than other types of financial sort of crises that private industry have been in. That being said, we can't just let a company that does have shareholders and makes profit off of not following the law. because as Michael pointed out of those 16 fires last year, 11 of them, it's suspected that PG&E committed a crime. They broke the law. There's not really another scenario where you'd say you break the law and you should get away with it. But that's the question, is who's going to pay? So who pays in the end? And this is where we really don't know. We need to know if it's true if PG&E is going to go bankrupt. We also need to know their total liabilities, and we don't even know that yet from 2017 because we don't know the cause of the biggest fire, the Tubbs fire. It's likely it was a utility line, but until we don't know the exact damages. So we're dealing with a lot of unknown numbers. And I think as it said on the slide, the legislators only have till the end of August to figure this out. So that's where a lot of folks don't even know if something is really going to get through on the liability. And I wish I could give you a little more clarity today, but this is complicated stuff. If we're all going to pay more as a state for better systems, we need to figure out the way to do that in the least painful way. PG&E goes bankrupt, everyone's rates go up. People's rates are probably going up anyways. They are going to go up because they need to implement more regulations, and they're allowed to pass those costs to us under the law. So our rates are going up either way, and we got to figure out the best way to do it. We don't necessarily have sympathy for PG&E. That's not what Senator Dodd's here to do. He's not here to rescue them. He's here to make sure how ratepayers, how his constituents have the least amount of harm. And then parallel to that is the fire survivors. Asking those folks to pay more for a service that caused them to lose their home just doesn't feel right. And there's lots of ideas out there. This committee's looking at a lot, maybe some sort of fund that could be for victims of all types. There's talk about issuing state bonds for PG&E. They would use this to pay off some of these insurance costs. That's what's being called a bailout. But I do want to point out we'd actually make money on that as a state. They'd be paying it back with interest. But still, it's pretty hard to tell people that we should help out PG&E right now. There's a lot of emotion involved. And again, so we're looking at what sparks a fire. The utilities and putting in better safety regulations. And then the other part of that triangle was the fuel. We need to do a way better job of managing our forests. It's really been neglected for over 100 years, and this is CAL FIRE saying this now. We've been putting out fires too much. We're getting too good at it. Fires need to burn in California. The natural environment was shaped for thousands of years by Native Americans with fire. Now, we're never going to go back to that, of course, but it's an important part of the puzzle that's missing. You can see old pictures from this area of people's hillsides behind their ranches and farms that only have a few oak trees, and you look at the same hillside and it's just carpeted with trees and shrubs. It's not how it's supposed to look, and it's a lot of fuel. Firefighters get really nervous when they see that type of hillside. We got to work on that. Some of it involves environmental laws. That's certainly not the only culprit. Some of it involves culture. We need to get people to understand that there's going to be controlled burns around their home, that's a normal part of living in California. Fire is part of our way of life, and we've kind of forgotten that. And so that's the other side, is the fuel. On the weather, there's only so much we can do there. We can predict it better, though. We definitely can do that. So that's another requirement we're going to be putting on PG&E, and it's already started, is to develop a much better weather monitoring system. San Diego is kind of the model of it. They had really large fires in 2003 and 2007. They learned a lot. They have 78 different weather monitoring stations in San Diego County, essentially every ridgeline, like every quarter mile. And they can de-energize their lines. They can predict where a fire is going to go. They can see in the first few seconds how hot it is. Really dictates a lot of the fire behavior for the next few hours. So they have a really great system. It's a different place, San Diego County, than Northern California. There's a lot less trees. But we're going to put some of those requirements on PG&E. We can have a better beat on what's happening in the weather. So that's kind of a lot of the fire stuff. Again, I can go on for a while. This is what we've been doing for 10 months. And kind of in that, right after the fires, all the local legislators, all 5, came together, and we made this package of bills. It's about 15 bills, and it dealt with everything having to do with the fire that was apparent right away. A lot of it was insurance stuff, and sadly, a lot of that didn't get through. The insurance industry is very influential in Sacramento. It was hard for us to get better protections for people and more guaranteed payouts, essentially. And that's really been one of the biggest obstacles to people rebuilding is usually code improvements aren't covered in your insurance. So if your house is 40 years old, older, you need to bring it up to modern code standards. And if you're in a fire area, high fire risk, there's even higher standards. We tried to get people a little more help with that, and that might continue next year, but that's a hard fight. These are some of the biggest, most powerful forces in our society. They say, the insurance companies have said if we put too many regulations on them, they're just going to pull out of California altogether. We can't say if that's right or wrong. We kind of suspect that won't happen right away, but they're making that threat. So this is the balance that we deal with. So that's kind of the fire stuff. It's a big topic, and I'll talk on a couple other issues that we deal with in our office that I think a lot of people around here would care a lot about. Highway 37 is one that we've been on for a while. There's regular meetings. Supervisor Rabbit is the chairman of a 4-county group on that, and it's really on the locals to push it forward, but they're actively meeting on it. The gas tax that was passed last year is helping to start pay for that. Regional Measure 3, the bridge toll increase, is paying for a lot of the planning costs. So they really are moving forward. I know it feels like they've been talking about it forever. But we're going to have an elevated roadway out there someday, or we're going to have no roadway. Those are the only options. It's going to be underwater in 30 years. It's not just sea level rise. The mud it's built on is literally sinking. It's already sunk 2 feet since it was constructed. So it's inevitable. It's going to be underwater. I don't need to tell anyone from Petaluma how detrimental that would be to getting around the Bay Area. It would be horrible for Marin County's economy. Tons of their service workers come in on Highway 37. Half the people that use Highway 37 live in Solano County and work in Marin. It's not really a mystery. That's who's going. Those folks sit in traffic every single day, keeping them away from their families, making them pay for childcare. We need to do this for our constituents, but it's going to be expensive, and that's what likely will happen. It'll be the next toll bridge. It'll be another bridge. I think people are willing to pay for that if it's a good enough improvement. But that's really now more, like I said, at the local level. But the state has to be involved. To give a state highway over to this local authority requires the legislature to vote on it. So we're paying attention. It'll come to Senator Dodd eventually, and you'll probably start hearing more about it. Another big issue that a little farther away from Petaluma we're dealing with is Sonoma Developmental Center. That's a big center in the Sonoma Valley where developmentally disabled residents lived. It opened in 1891. It was built for 40,000 people at its peak, and there's now less than 100 residents left. So it's a huge campus, 800 acres, 90 of which are buildings. We need to figure out what we're going to do with it, and it's owned by the state. So we have an involvement in that we need to figure out the best use of that land. It's not really up to the state. It should be up to the local community. And so the county supervisor out there, Susan Gorin's been working on it. But that takes a lot of time to figure out what to do with this big, huge state resource. So that's sort of some of the local issues that I deal with. We've had a lot of different legislation moving through this year, whether it's consumer privacy. Senator Dodd was involved in that. You can now ask a company like Facebook to delete your data permanently, and they have to comply based on state law. If your data is breached, there are daily fines. This doesn't just apply to something like Facebook, it also applies to like Equifax, things like that. And some companies had some valid concerns about this. If there were third parties handling the data, would they be liable? So we're already looking at those issues. But that was an important issue to the senator. He actually had his identity stolen. So it's something he's worked on for years. So that got a lot of news, and it's great. We are now at the forefront in the world of consumer privacy legislation. So those companies have a lot of money too, but they didn't win that fight. Let's see. And we like to do a lot on water. You know, he was the Colgan man once upon a time, but he does a lot of different water issues. We've worked on groundwater. That's a big issue around here, and you know, I could get into that too. But I think I'll leave the rest of the time for questions if that works, Michael. Where's Michael at?
Right here.
Great. Is that good?
Excellent. All right.
Question.
I've been around a few years, and one of the things I noticed is we have less services than I think ever before.
I volunteer at a high school. In order to keep the shop programs going, they're constantly having to do fundraisers. We don't have after-school programs. We don't have summer programs. We raise our gas taxes. We pay more taxes than ever before, and yet we always hear there's no money. So a lot of times they blamed it on Prop 13. Well, houses now, I think the average is going 800,000 in our area. And so it seems to me you have probably more money than ever before, and we have less services than ever before. Our education system is in the dumps. We're one of the least funded education systems in the country. So some have alluded and said maybe it's our social welfare program that's taking up all the money. Where's the money going, and why don't we have it?
So a deep dive into the state budget. Let's do it. 40% of the state budget goes directly to K through 12 education. That's in the Constitution. It's called Prop 98. So that cannot be fiddled with. And if you want to get into, you know, discretionary budgeting, I actually think that's detrimental to have things earmarked in a certain way. But that's kind of the theory of budgeting. We won't get that nerdy. We have that guarantee. That's in the state constitution. So that is, that's actually higher than most states, but you are right that we're still not ranked the best. So we're ranked about, again, depends how you rank it. So we're ranked about 41st for student achievement. Some people would put us at 26th for other measures. There's a couple different measurements out there. That's still not good. So I'm not defending 26th place out of 50. But that's how the education portion of the budget works. It's already allocated. So, and let me also just say, when they go to do the budget, 88% of it is already allocated by law. So they're essentially just toying around with 12%. So that's where you really get into, we've set up all these interest groups and carve-outs, tax credits for filmmaking or whatever it is. These are all baked into the cake. So when they show up to do the budget, like I said, they're literally only playing with 12% of their overall pie. So you'd have to change a lot. Prop 13 is definitely part of it, but that really probably hurts local governments more than the state. So that's definitely one reason you're seeing less local services. You know, there's obviously costs go up, but where is all the money? We have a surplus, so I guess that's part of that answer too. We're doing pretty fiscally responsible right now in that way. If you want to talk about pensions, that's obviously a whole big piece of that. Those are pre-existing contracts, and it's still up for debate legally if you can change a pre-existing contract by law. So does that mean we need to renegotiate all of those contracts? Probably, but that's not really something the legislature can mandate. So we've set up the system of things essentially to be lazy, putting in those guarantees for education, which I'm not saying that's bad, they should get the money, but like I said, when you're showing up and only playing with 12% of the money, it's hard to say where's all the money going. 88% of it's already going somewhere. We can talk more.
I'm curious. We were told, it was sold that the lottery was going to take care of the education system in the state. Where does all that money go?
We have looked at the lottery a little bit. It does go to education. I don't know the exact amount that the lottery generates, though, so I can't help you there as to how much of it's going. But it does, by law, go into that. It's not going anywhere else. I think one of the problems with education is, like with the shop classes disappearing, after school, we have more and more requirements from the federal government and from the state government as to what students have to do. And so that costs money. Every time you add a new math or English requirement, it takes away from those other things. Those are important. But I can get you a better answer on the lotto if we connect after. I can actually find out. I don't know the exact number, but it does still all go to schools. I know that. Yeah.
On Highway 37, there was an idea floated that they would be built by a private contractor versus the state. Is that even an option anymore?
Yeah, they haven't made any final choice at all, so it's definitely still an option. I think that private company had a somewhat unusual business model. So it's not unusual to give a service contract over to a private operator. That's happening more and more. They wanted a 99-year lease. Most of these deals are 40 or 50 years, so that was just one thing that made a lot of people very wary. It's hard to predict that a private equity firm is going to be around in 99 years. So that was, I think, part of it. I think the question, too, was exactly what were they willing to do. They wanted to mostly, I think, just do the tolling. So there's still a lot of other jobs, like maintenance, the security, that it wasn't clear that they wanted to do. I know that they were given about 50 questions or so by this local government group, and I don't think that the local government committee was totally satisfied with all the answers, so I think they might still be developing it. So it's still an option out there. They're trying to figure out what's going to cost the least, and so in the long run, and there's some studies that those are good in some instances. It worked well on the Presidio Parkway, so that's kind of the model. Yeah, it might still happen.
You mentioned Highway 37. What about the Narrows? Is that in your realm, or? Yes,
That is now in Sonoma County pretty much fully funded. That's assuming that the gas tax is not repealed. That's Proposition 6 on the ballot. I'm not allowed to campaign. I'm on state time, so I'm not telling you what to do in that. I'm just telling you the effect. If it's repealed, they've already allocated money from that in Sonoma County to complete Highway 101 completely. So if that is not rescinded by the voters, from the Marin County line to Corona Road, there's going to be 3 lanes both directions. In Marin County, it's a little different. That is just frankly not their priority. So their priority in Marin County is the 580 interchange, and that makes sense. If you've ever been on that in the morning, it's a parking lot. So that's their #1 priority. And they say that the Narrows is #2. Now, a lot of folks don't believe Marin when they make commitments to transportation projects, but I actually think this time they mean it. They really have started some of the planning work. So they've already spent some money, which they likely wouldn't have done if they weren't going to move forward. So on the Sonoma County side, we've got it figured out. We're waiting for Marin to get that final piece, but we hear about it all the time.
So just to follow up then, timeline on Sonoma County will completely depend on Marin. If they don't agree anything, we're not.
No, Sonoma County's doing their own thing. So we're going to do our own thing from the county line to Corona Road, regardless of Marin County.
Assuming we don't get repealed, the date-ish would be next year, 2 years, 5 years?
I think it was 2023, but this is a county thing. Call David Rabbit. He would know. Yeah.
Doug Johnson will go next. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
How about an update on Senator Dodd's bill to combat fake news with media literacy?
Yeah, that is that's a good one. Back to the school thing, just real quick. Teachers actually didn't like that at first. They liked it, but they said the question was about our media literacy bill. So I'll explain the bill. It's a bill to establish a critical thinking curriculum in high school. So to graduate from UC or CSUs, you have to take a critical thinking class. It's a philosophy class. We're now going to make that a requirement. That's all. That's all it is. So We're calling it's called media literacy because it's going to have a focus on that. Stanford did a study, 86% of 8th graders couldn't tell the difference between real and total fake news article that was manufactured to trick them. So that's scary. We actually kind of feel like the young folks might have it down a little better, so maybe we need to teach some other folks, but we can't send them back to school. So we got to start somewhere. It's going to be in high school. But the teachers actually didn't like it at first because we didn't give them more money to do it. So we said, hey, here's 30 minutes more of instruction, figure it out. So we had to work with them to figure out how can we put it into the curriculum. But it's moving forward this year, so yeah.
So I guess my original question would be, how many people have read Parkinson's Law? It has to do with bureaucracy. I wonder if, this is just anecdotal, but I wonder if part of the problem with PG&E, like DMV, like anything else, is that there's no incentive to change things. If I'm a supervisor at PG&E and I know something has to be replaced, I know I'm going to get flack for it. I mean, I'm not thinking about current liability. I'm thinking about a way to make that easier so that someone won't be punished or won't suffer in his career. I don't know how you can do that, but I think that's a real problem. I've seen a lot of people complain about things to PG&E and they don't do it until it's a disaster.
Yeah, some folks have talked about, we're not usually one to just say make a new bureaucracy, but we might need some sort of safety department in the state. There's actually a lot of different people that cover different safety areas like seismic and then utility. Probably would make sense to bring them all into one entity, and that might be somewhere where there could be like a hotline. It's a good idea. Could be a future law. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you for having me. We'll try to get Senator Dodd out here again. He wanted to come. He really did because he loves Rotary. So.
You have been awesome. I can't thank you enough for being here at the spur of the moment, and you really know your stuff. And I'd just like to say is that did everybody enjoy this? Was it good? I think you learned a lot. I have a speaker for the speaker, and someday you may be speaker of the House, so here's a Bluetooth speaker for that. But it sounds like you've got a great future, and thanks for representing us to Senator Bill. And they said, would we want him to come back in maybe in a month or so? And I don't know. I think you were very successful, so we'll see. It'll be a battle of the Titans between you and him. Thanks again. Very good job. Okay. Well, okay, everyone, thank you so much for coming today. I hope you had a good time, and excuse me. I don't have my lollipop with me, so maybe I'll be fine another month, but it's somewhere at the table, but I promise I will be licking at some. Thank you, Grace Nisser, for bringing that up to me. Echo here, but I guess with that, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting unless anybody has anything else. Thank you all very much, and that's so sweet of you, darling. And with that, the meeting, I don't know which one to lick, is adjourned. Thanks so much for coming. Have a great day.